Hey everyone, I'm Mike Del Preti, and you're listening to Context, the podcast where I'm talking to industry leaders about what's changing in the world of real estate. My guest today is Mr. Damian Eales, CEO of Realtor.com. Hello.
Great to be here, Mike.
I really appreciate you coming into town.
No problem. You live in a beautiful part of the world, let me tell you.
This is awesome. You've picked a great day.
Snow-capped mountains. Doesn't get any better.
This is turning into a tourism commercial. It's awesome to have you here. I stopped shaving for the week in anticipation of your visit here.
Appreciate it.
I think
I feel at home.
you're pulling off a better beard than I am. And so just a background, CEO of Realtor.com, you've been in the job how long now?
I guess it's about 16 months.
16 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And you came over from Australia for that.
I was between this role and Australia. I was a couple of years in New York working for our group company, News Corp.
Yeah.
I was leading a transformation effort across all of our businesses globally.
Okay. So as a certified Australian, I'm
Yeah.
hoping for a good answer to this question. How do you typically start your day?
I started, well, there's an Australian component to this answer because I started waking up in the morning looking at my phone and looking at both news from family, friends, but also what's happening in Australia. I can't cut the cord entirely. In fact, I'm a news junkie actually, so I read all of the Australian titles that I would read if I was still living in Australia. But now, in addition to that, I spend probably at least an hour every morning reading the Journal and the New York Post and the New York Times and
Mm-hmm.
and as many other publications I can get my hands on. If you like politics, this is a good place to live.
Yeah.
There's a lot to read.
Oh, that's good. What about caffeination strategies?
Caffeination is coffee. Interestingly, Australians are a little bit snobby about their coffee.
Oh,
Actually,
you don't say.
they love the barista-made coffee. But when I came to the US, I said to myself, actually, my son who lives in the US told me I need to adopt American coffee. So I've brought myself to have an affection for drip coffee.
Mm.
So I start the day with just a regular cup of coffee, and I keep on drinking it throughout the day.
So probably the most controversial question I'll ask today and maybe the entire podcast. Flat white originated in Australia
Yeah.
or New Zealand?
Oh, wow. I had no idea that there was any controversy about that. I would have said Australia, but Australia is well known to steal a lot of things from New Zealand, most particularly actors, actresses, and musical bands.
All right. So you've heard it here first,
Mm.
flat white in New Zealand.
In Australia.
Well, stolen, perhaps
Okay,
stolen.
fine, fine.
Well, let's keep on the theme of strategy. I love strategy. I'm a student of history and strategy, and I really like that. I mean, you came into Realtor.com, not, I don't know what to say, number two portal by many measures at the time, but, in a very active environment. I mean, what was your process like when you came in, when you started thinking about what is the strategy for this business?
Yeah. When I look back, I think the observation of the real estate industry when I joined was that it was going through an incredibly tumultuous period, be it if you look at the actions against the NAR and many of our customers from a class action perspective, the regulatory environment. If you look at the competitive environment, I would say it's been the most competitive probably in our 26-year history. I think that, and of course, from a revenue environment, the gridlock that has occurred in this market is peculiar in a global sense. So many challenges. I think the first thing you do facing an environment like that, contemplating strategies, I think you've got to look at all of those negatives and contemplate there is a positive. Somebody will take advantage of each of these negatives.
Mm.
How are we going to take advantage of each of them? And I think that that's really been pervasive in our thinking over the last 12 months. Don't just complain that it's a negative. If there's antitrust and regulatory actions against realtors, then how can we make realtors more professional? How can we leverage this as a moment to do something good for the industry by pointing out the professionalism of realtors? If it's a particularly competitive environment, then that sharpen the saw. That
Mm.
gives us an opportunity to fight harder or differently than we have previously. So I think that that's important. I think that the other thing that's incredibly important, the other two things that I would say has kind of defined our strategy that we have today is listen to customers, listen very carefully to what they have to say. Obviously, consumers on one hand, but customers particularly on the other, because they're the ones fundamentally in our business model that generate revenue for us. And so we spent a lot of time really understanding what customers' likes and dislikes were about our business, but also what their likes and dislikes were with our competitors' offerings.
What's something you heard from your customers that surprised you?
The biggest thing that surprised me was the power of the brand and the history of the relationship that we have with customers. I would, I reflected to a few people. I love the band LCD Sound System. I don't know if you follow them, Mike, but they're worth keeping an eye on. And they wrote a great song during the pandemic, New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down.
Mm-hmm.
It was like Realtor, I love you, but you're bringing me down. There are some things that you guys are doing that are really making it hard for us to do business with you. I would often meet our customers who would swing their laptop around and show me the business that they do with Zillow and the business that they do with us. And they would say, we would love to move a lot of this business across to you, but you're going to have to do some things differently. Some of those things were hygiene things that we just had to fix. Billing,
Mm-hmm.
would be one example of the fact that we had 3 apps for 3 different products. We weren't really a customer centric organization. We were a product centric organization. And so we've had to spend a lot of time replatforming our core technology to better serve customers. But the thing that surprised me most is that when we have improved things, we've gained share, and we can measure it with those individual teams or brokers that we've dealt with. It really says to me, we have a very powerful brand. We have a very important role to play in the industry more broadly, and we should lean into that.
Mm-hmm. So, how, from a strategy perspective, how are you competing where you can win?
Hmm. Well, I think focus is probably the other word that comes to mind for me when you think about defining strategy. It's about, it's almost like the John West philosophy of strategy. It's the things that you reject
Mm.
that will really make you good at what you choose to do. And in our business, we've spent a lot of time, again, we've taken the perspective that when the tide goes out, it exposes, I think it was Charlie Munger who says when the tide goes out, it shows you who's not wearing their pants. And for us, a lack of revenue really exposes every problem that you've got in your business. So it's enabled us to really focus our resources very carefully on our core business, which is core, buy, and sell. And I'll come back to that in a minute. That has meant that on other things around that, we need to spend less time on. So, an example would be rent.
Mm.
We were investing a lot of money in trying to build a rental business when really that fight to some extent was lost some time ago between apartments.com and Zillow. And so we chose instead to partner with Zillow on the basis that not only does that free up our resources so that we can focus more on our core buy and sell business, but it enables us to make a lot more money in the process.
Mm.
So focus has been a very core component of our thinking, and that has been fix up our aspects of our buy business that we needed work. But also, it's been because we've been such a product centric organization, I would say historically, again, we would have products like we bought the OpCity product, therefore we have a referral product now to sell. So let's go and sell that product. Whereas I've thought of it very differently. I've said, who do we sell that product to? Well, it's not really the realtor. It's actually, if you really look at who we're very successful with, it's with the team.
Mm.
So let's start with the team, and then let's say, what are the needs that that team has more broadly, and how can we earn the right to service more of those needs? It starts with buy. That might be upper funnel leads in a connections product that we have, or it might be lower funnel in terms of a referral product that we have. But those teams are dealing with the buy side of the business. They're equally dealing with the sell side of the business. So how do we help them win more listings? And we've done that through launching what's called Listing Toolkit, which has been very successful. And indeed, we've done that through the acquisition of a company called Upnest, which we've rebranded as Real Choice Selling, where consumers have a choice to choose a listing agent of their preference.
So, parent company here is News Corp, a large multinational media conglomerate, and they are also a majority owner in REA Group, the leading property portal in Australia, like we were chatting about beforehand, which is, the most profitable property portal on the planet. How do you think about leveraging News Corp's various assets?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and it kind of goes back to your very first question about strategy too. When I think of strategy, I also think of what are your unique strengths or your unique advantages that you can properly leverage. And so leveraging News Corp, it's not the first time that we've been around this block. I mean, one of my previous roles in Australia was the Chief Operating Officer of our traditional publishing business, News Corp Australia. And that sat alongside the REA Group. And we absolutely leveraged every asset of the publishing business to drive the REA Group. And in doing so, their audience leadership increased substantially over that period of time that we all worked together. And they're still working together incredibly strongly today. So how you leverage News Corp, how we're leveraging News Corp in America is on many different dimensions. One dimension is just traditional advertising. I don't think you can really take a look at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post or the US Sun today without seeing Realtor.com ads. Another way of doing it is through leveraging journalism. So if you look at the Wall Street Journal mobile side and you go to the end of the feed, you'll see 5 articles from Realtor.com on the Wall Street Journal every day of the week. Now, similarly in MarketWatch, you'll see our content appear, and similarly in the New York Post. So leveraging journalism across platforms, not only does that give us a bigger audience, but it gives us a lot of authority in terms of our search authority as well.
So you've got, REA Group, an incredible portal, but it's in a totally different market, Australia. I mean,
Yeah.
can you actually leverage learnings from there, or is it just too different?
Absolutely. I mean, a great example of that when I started was this recognition that we'd acquired a lot of companies, but we've never properly integrated them into our core technology. Again, as revenue comes down, you suddenly realise that literally in our business, almost 50% of our investment in technology was just keeping the lights on this very fractured tech stack. REA was in somewhat of a similar position 5 or 6 years ago. We leveraged the same executives that modernised their technology to come across to the US to work with me and my team to develop the plan to modernise our technology. We've subsequently invested a lot of that money, and now 22% of our investment in technology is keeping the lights on. So we've taken their learnings and accelerated the modernisation of our tech stack. We've created a centre of excellence for journalism as another example, where our journalists, not just in REA in Australia and in Realtor.com here in the US, but also real estate journalists across all of our titles, including in the UK, work together to share content globally across all of those divisions. That's another example. We're sharing learnings in AI as another example, whereby there are some similarities in what we can do to take traditional visuals and turn them into a more 3D experience, as an example, or conversational search as another example. The REA executive team visited Austin, Texas last January, and my team is visiting Melbourne, Australia this coming January. The REA board visited Austin, Texas last October. And in all of those interactions, there is an exchange of ideas and opportunities that where we haven't thought of an opportunity or a problem that we're maybe about to encounter, and vice versa. And the final area is where we exchange talent, where we're starting to find opportunities for lower down in the organisation for people to spend more time in Australia or vice versa.
Okay. So 16 months, you must have had to come up to speed pretty quick on the US real estate market. What's something you know about the market now that you wish you knew when you started?
Well, it's a very different market, that's for sure. It took me a long time to really understand the history of the market. And yeah, in some respects, I wish there was a crash course in it, but really understanding the concept of buyer agency and the benefits that that delivers this market, and it doesn't exist to the same extent, at least in other markets, I think is a really important nuance that is deeply embedded in the American consumer. Recognizing that in the 1990s, before Realtor.com was established, there was a consumer advocacy movement that really challenged traditional listing agent commissions, which were 6% or more back then, and demanded buyer agency. It was born out of consumer advocacy. And to see that that has now, over some 30 or so years, those commissions have decreased to closer to 5.2%, and yet both sides of the transaction are represented, I think has been a great win for the American model of real estate. Of course, transparency can be improved, and of course, competition will increase over time, and of course, technology will remove friction from the process and save money on account of doing so. But fundamentally, that is the biggest difference. Some people, I think, in America claim that that system is a negative in comparison to a place like Australia, but I genuinely believe that it is a much more pro-consumer approach than what we see in some other countries.
Yeah. So, as the CEO of this organization, how do you know that you're successful and doing a good job?
Well, I think in the first instance, it's if we can do a great job for our customers. I often say to our team as we develop our strategies for improving our customer centric assortment of products rather than our fragmented product assortment that we sell to any customers, is to say true success will look like the team that chooses to do business with us gains market share in their market because they've chosen the right partner in that market. And that gives you a whole new perspective as to how you can help that team. Is it as simple as just selling them buyer leads? It's not. It's about how can we improve the productivity of their business? How can we help them recruit more agents to their team? How can we help them on the sell side, not just the buy side? How can we leverage News Corp assets to help market their brand in their local market? They're all of the ways that we should be thinking, and we are thinking about how we can help a customer grow market share. Ultimately, that's success. If we do that, I have no doubt that other customers will clamber over those customers to try and do business
Mm.
with us. And I think that being great on the consumer side is table stakes in this business because listings are free and
Hmm.
ubiquitous, and fundamentally listings are the primary reason why people come to any of these portals. We have an advantage of our consumer brand, which is more trusted than any of the other brands, so we'll play on that heavily. But true success is that we can monetize that audience. True success is that we monetize it through working with realtors and teams.
So, for you as an individual, though, for knowing if you're doing a good job, how do you think about that? How do you measure yourself?
Well, ultimately, if our customers are gaining market share, we're gaining market share.
Yeah.
And, we are in the worst growth 2 year or perhaps 3 year period in the 26-year history of our company. So it's not exactly a growth story right now, but I'll measure our success on the basis that we're doing the right things in the down cycle, such that when the up cycle turns, we are perfectly positioned to gain an outsized share of growth.
How do you spend your time during the week? What's a typical week look like for you?
It's interesting. I think in this role, at times I've felt guilty that not every single hour in the day is packed with a meeting. And I've found that in other roles that I've had, there has never been time to think. And I think it's the most important differentiator in this role versus other roles that I've done, which is you've got to give yourself time to really think through what are the implications of a very complex problem? What are you hearing from customers? What are you reading in the newspaper? How are you interpreting the hype that you might be reading in trade media?
Yeah.
And how do you turn that into the tactics of the next week or the strategy for the next 3 years?
So, how do you give yourself that think time?
Well, I make sure that I schedule it in, and I have very good people around me that take a lot of things off my plate that I perhaps would otherwise be doing. We've got a very talented team of executives at Realtor.com that I inherited actually, who do a wonderful job in each of their portfolios in ensuring that we have those opportunities to really debate as a team, both individually and as a team, the direction that we need to go.
What do you do during that think time? Do you just sit quietly?
Yeah, I'm very good at sketching on blank pieces of paper what I want, and my team will often talk about that because they often get handed
Yeah.
a piece of paper out of a meeting. That's fundamentally what I do. But I also think that if you love your job, you never turn off.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love my job, and so I never turn off. So I'm always thinking about an opportunity to gain share or an opportunity to do something better or to leverage a situation more. And that will be equally as much on a weekend as during the week.
Yeah. Is there any particular one metric you look at on a daily basis?
Yeah, I look at audience share. I can't look at that on a daily basis, but I can look at the lead indicator of audience. And, we've been in the most competitive market, again, of 26 years, and yet we've held audience share during the last 12 months, despite a lot of investment from competitors. We've been completely outspent, but through leveraging the News Corp network, we've held our ground.
Why is that important?
Because ultimately, audience drives leads, and leads really unlocks the opportunity to have a broader relationship with our customers. It all starts with the audience in this business. And not just any audience, it starts with a really highly engaged audience that's willing to submit a lead, that's really ready to put their hand up and say, it's time for me to connect to a professional, somebody who can help them through that transaction or advise them through that transaction. So
Mm.
that's probably the biggest day-to-day indicator. And the second one is obviously customer revenue. So to look at our forward bookings is also incredibly important. And increasingly, we look at NPS
Mm.
in our business because at the end of the day, as we move from a product-centric business to a customer-centric business, we're far more interested in how many customers we have who are willing to promote us to their family and friends. And equally, we're interested in the causes of detraction. So, we don't just count how many detractors we've got. We look at the core reasons why they're a detractor. And that really helps us prioritize what our development plan is.
On the revenue metric, it's not that everything is about money, but, and I get this from talking to entrepreneurs and people with startup ideas. I mean, revenue is just a great metric to prove that you're delivering value to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great early indicator that somebody values your product.
Right. And
And
that's ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, in the portal business, you need to be delivering value to
exactly,
your customers.
exactly.
So if your boss kind of floated in and said, "Hey, Damien, I got $250 million. I want you to invest it in the business," what would you do with that?
I'd probably invested in our relationship with the MLS
Hmm.
system. I think that Realtor.com has an incredibly unique industry relationship with the MLSs. And I think it stems all the way back 26 years through the actions of the NAR at the time and the MLSs. A circumstance arose whereby listings in this country were published, broadcast for free.
Mm.
And we never joined the IDX system, which would make us, I would call you a backdoor broker. We are a portal that works with the industry to ensure that those listings are broadcast and they're done in a way that is good for consumers, but also good for realtors. And I think that we have a unique shared mission with the MLSs in that regard. And I think that between the MLSs and Realtor.com, there are ways that we can work better together for the good of both American buyers and sellers and for the good of realtors.
Okay, interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the past 16 months and even 3 years. I mean, it's been a hell of a time to get in this business. And there's been a lot of challenges, I'm sure, thrown at you. And you've had to make decisions. What's your personal philosophy around decision making?
It's really in our business, try and find the right balance between the needs of the customer, in our case, the consumer, and of course, our shareholder. And I think that if our North Star is that we are trying to get a triple bottom line in that regard, then I think that we're always going to make the right decision.
Okay. But then for you as an individual, when you have to make those decisions, do you value making decisions fast, slow, consensus driven, getting a lot of information?
Yeah, I think always start with the facts, not opinion.
Mm,
Always encourage debate
yeah.
and then make a decision as fast as you possibly can and move on and deliver. Debate, decide, deliver, the
Mm,
three words that we use.
okay.
I really value, and I think if you asked anybody on my leadership team, they would attest to the fact that I encourage and I value debate in our leadership team meetings
Why?
because I learn from it.
Mm,
If you create an environment whereby people are willing to put up a reason why or why not, you may not agree with that reason, but at least you're exposing it. And if you can determine that there's a fact base behind it and there is a good rationale behind it, then it will be added to the solution. But you'll never get that if people are afraid to speak up.
mm,
And there are many times where I might be about to make the wrong decision. Well, the greatest gift that one of my team can give me is to call out that this is going to be a mistake. And 8 times out of 10, I think everybody around the table agrees that we're heading in the right direction. As much as I encourage that debate, I also value cabinet solidarity. So
hmm
when we leave the room, it's our decision. It's not the 8 people who made the decision against the 2 dissenters. We're all on the hook. We're all committed, and we're all holding our head high, saying we're going to implement this exceptionally well.
What's the toughest call you've had to make since you've been in this role?
The toughest call, was probably the rentals decision.
Mm,
Because I think our team had invested a lot of time and energy. A lot of great people who worked really hard on that project left the organisation at the time. I'm certain that that strategy would have ultimately have been successful, but it is one of the decisions that you get better at making, I think, as you get older, is you've just got to be brutal in terms of saying we're only going to do a small number of things. We're going to do them exceptionally well. And then we will sequentially implement more over time because we can put to bed these things faster. We know that we've done it at a higher level of quality, so there's less walking back to fix things, and you can get on to the next priority
Yeah.
sooner.
I'm hearing that consistent theme of focus, focus, focus. I think that's great. We talked about it before. I mean, you listen to this
Sure.
podcast and you read some of my research. Is there anything that I've been doing or talking about or a guest you've heard recently that's been especially compelling or a research area you think I should focus on?
I wonder if you know the answer that I'm going to give you on this one is I think you should do a proper analysis of audience.
Hmm.
We spoke about the importance of audience.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of our competitors has made outrageous claims in terms of what their audience is, and they've used that claim to sell subscriptions to access that audience, which were deceptive and misleading and have been found to be deceptive and misleading by regulators. You can't use internal comparisons of Google Analytics. A product that can be configured to count internal traffic, testing traffic, can be configured across websites to double count the same user across multiple websites.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make like for like comparisons. I think that if people are buying subscriptions, and I think 11,000 people have bought subscriptions on the basis of an audience that doesn't exist, then I think brands like yours should expose it.
Hmm. I mean, that'll all come out in the wash, though, right? Going back
Yeah,
to our
but there's a
comment
lot of
about.
damage. There's a lot of collateral damage that occurs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of churn occurring
Mm-hmm.
right now with that company.
Mm.
I mean, well, you can see that from their SEC filings. Extraordinary. So, yes, it does come out in the wash, but I do feel for the people who buy it, thinking that they were buying something that they weren't receiving, value that they weren't receiving.
Okay. Any particularly interesting guests or comments or insights that you've heard from this podcast?
Look, I think Jeremy, it was great to hear Jeremy on the podcast recently. I mean, Zillow is our number one competitor without any shadow of a doubt. Don't be misled by our partnership on rentals. We're coming for them in every other way.
You guys are good for each other, though,
I think
right?
so. Competition makes us all better.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think competition done in the right way,
right.
in a respectful way, is good.
Well, you both talk about doing good for the consumer.
Sure.
You talk about doing good for your clients
They're
and
pro-buyer
delivering.
agency. They've been advocates for some of the things that we've said publicly, and
Yeah.
I think there's plenty that we can agree on, but we'll compete vigorously.
Yeah. Well, nobody said, oh, we want to bury those guys
Yeah.
and get rid of them.
Yeah, that's
Like you
right.
said, it's a healthy form of
Yeah,
competition.
and I think Jeremy's a very smart guy, and he's a formidable competitor.
Oh, good. Good to hear. Well, that's all I got today. Any closing thoughts?
No, I would like to come back to Boulder as my closing thought and get to know this town. It looks like a great, fun college town and very close to America's wonderful ski slope. So I'll be back, Mike.
Okay, great. You're welcome back anytime. All right. Well, thanks for joining Damian. I'm Mike Del Preti, and you've been listening to Context. If you want to read more of my research, you can check out my website, mikedp.com. All right. Thanks.